Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of our, I was about to say tactical breakdown show because it feels like that with the pre-recorded nature of this, but it is in fact the Arsenal transfer show, which is joining you every morning at 8 a.m. UK time. However, today's show is slightly different because it is a pre-recorded episode. For those that have been very keenly listening will know that today I'm going to be on my golf charity event in which I'm doing 72 holes in one day. To try and raise money for Cancer Macmillan. We've raised over nearly £1,500 in the weeks that we've been leading up to this, which is great. So thank you to everybody that has donated. I'm going to be trying to do some filming if I can in throughout, so I can kind of put it all together in a bit of a vlog, so you can see some of the event yourselves. No promises because it's going to rain apparently quite heavily, so we'll see how much videoing is even feasible in those conditions. But yeah, I'm hoping to put at least something together. But thank you to everyone that continues to tune in and listen. Do make sure you drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here with those notifications turned on so you never miss a show. And with this being a slightly different style of transfer show, it's going to be a different format as well today. Rather than just me chatting away and then taking your questions, I'm also going to be joined by a couple of guests to talk about the latest Arsenal transfer news. Joining me, as has become quite regular across this summer with our tactical breakdowns, is Drew. Drew, how you doing, my friend? You good? You well?
Hey, happy Sunday. How are you?
Very good, mate. Very good indeed. Are
Yeah,
you enjoying the Women's World Cup and catch much of that going on?
it's been interesting actually. Yeah, I like a good upset. There's been a lot of nice stories, with Philippines
Mm.
coming in. It's been a fun watch, and I think it's been a great advert because some of the ratings that the matches have been getting. There's a lot of
Mm.
viewership as well. I do quite like that. A lot of people paying more attention to women's football. So yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, it has. Very exciting so far. I'm still very interested to see who can take it all the way in the end. European champions, we're coming for you. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. And joining us as well for today's show, of course, and our previous brother from 101 Great Goals is Ben Browning. How you doing, mate? You good? You well?
Yeah, very well, thank you. I think I said this to you last year as well, but I'm enjoying the fact that Arsenal get their business done early and then we can talk about 2 or 3 names rather than 20 or 30 every day.
Yes. Yeah, that was
Imagine
the
it's lovely
case
for you
last
too.
summer. Yeah, I think what was it? We managed to get down Jesus and Vieira and Zinchenko relatively early by this point, and looking ahead to the season, we ended up just having kind of a smooth ride throughout the course of last season anyway. So we're hoping that it repeats itself. But it seems though that Arsenal aren't done this summer. It seems that Arsenal still want to do some more business. Now, I think that a lot of people kind of expected that to be potentially a forwards. We had a chat the other day, Drew. We did a Mohamed Kudus tactical breakdown, and it felt as though that forward/right wing position would be something that we might attack, and we still might between now and the end of the window. Of course, there's still the opportunity for Arsenal to do that, but I'll be very honest. I didn't expect a link to be made to another goalkeeper. I feel like I'm back in 2021 all over again with Bernd Leno ready to take on a brand new season. And then all of a sudden, all of his life gets turned upside down when Arsenal go and spend 30 odd million quid on Aaron Ramsdale. We are linked with David Raya of Brentford. David Ornstein breaking the story initially, but it's certainly been corroborated elsewhere. Certainly, I learned in the afternoon that Brentford would be looking for around £40 million for the player, which ironically Thomas Frank has now actually come out and spoken about as well and says that's how much he would want. We'll go into some of the kind of logistics of the price and stuff, but just to get your initial reaction to the news, what did you make of it when it dropped?
Who?
I said Drew. This is what I mean. This is why I get professionals to do these
Oh,
shows.
please. I had to give you some
I'm
sort
going
of.
to
If you're
listen
playing,
back to this and go,
if
oh,
you're playing
damn, you said
70,
Drew.
if you're playing 72 holes of golf, I have to give you some grief somewhere. It'll be this. My initial thought really was kind of like yours. I didn't see it coming. And Ben and I were chatting with a bunch of the guys at Yama before this as well. And a lot of us are just kind of confused, similar. Just it's very rare that you have a club that has two first choice goalkeepers. Even though you have Champions League on offer, I still think my initial reaction was I don't get it. And then when I thought about it for maybe 20 minutes, Raya is the keeper we went after before Ramsdale. So is it maybe now that he's maybe available? Obviously Bayern want him. There's been some criticism about Ramsdale last season, further still preseason. I don't think Arteta's reactionary in terms of he wants to bring in a keeper because of that reaction, but more of is this going to be kind of like a cyclical thing? Are we now trying to improve on Ramsdale? Is it just for competition? I don't know, but 40 million is pretty steep for a keeper that we technically don't really need. And I guess initially, I just don't think it. Personally, I don't think it makes sense. But as I circle back to it again, I find myself struggling to really question things that Arteta and AD want to do, because when they do spend a considerable amount of money, there usually is a reason, and usually, well, not usually, always, that deal does pay off, as we've seen in the last kind of 2 summers. So it's one of those, yet again, I kind of have to have faith in it. But on the surface, even though Ramsdale does have his deficiencies, I think this might be a bit of a stretch for me. But I'm willing to wait and see what happens. But obviously Turner wanting more minutes, I think that's part and parcel of it, I think. But why would you replace a backup with another number one? And, I think that's too much competition that for me just doesn't kind of add up. So.
Yeah, I think we'll get into the Turner side of things as well. But I was certainly, surprised. I'd been doing a lot of defending of Ramsdale this summer. The chat box is probably talking about the irony right now of me saying and having these debates with people about how much I rate Ramsdale. I put him in the bracket of world-class keepers around the world. He's valued by CIES as the most valuable goalkeeper on the planet at 60 million euros, along with the likes of Donnarumma. He's very highly rated. Ben, before we again go into some of the more specific details of this, just give me your kind of initial reaction when you saw this story breaking today. I say today because we're recording it on Sunday, but yesterday for those listening.
Yeah, I mean, I had to do a double take and check that it was actually David Ornstein that had broken it. I got put in one of our chats, and I was sort of just like, this doesn't feel real, because obviously we were linked to them in 2020, 2021, when we had bids. I think it was like 9 million turned down, and now it's 40 million for a player that, as Drew said, we don't really need unless he's coming in to be a first choice. And there'll be lots of debate about you can't have first and second choices in teams that want to challenge for top honours. But if you look anywhere else, there's an undisputed first choice, whether that be City or Liverpool or anything. And the backup is very good. But very rarely do you see £40 million then spent on a bloke who's going to play 15 games, 20 games. And then if it comes down to it in a Champions League final, it'll be the other guy that's preferred. It feels like the right sort of profile, but at the price that it's coming in, the finances for me didn't quite add up. And I don't know whether that's, we don't know how the transfer window is going to pan out. So it's quite difficult to say now how it's going to go. If someone said, you've got 40 million today, would you rather go and buy David Raya or Mohamed Kudus? Who do you think is going to be more useful this season? The answer, most people would say Kudus. And you could end up with both, and that's absolutely fine. But it just seems like a strange pivot to go to goalkeeper of this caliber when we've had Matt Turner. Matt Turner's been fine. He's played, 7 games last season, I think, or 8 games last season. So it doesn't feel like somewhere we need to buy a player of that caliber and already at the level that Raya is. He's ready to come in, and a lot of people would say he's better than Ramsdale or as good as Ramsdale. And Ramsdale only signed his new contract, last month? Or the month before. So it feels very strange to me. But as Drew says, you can't really knock anything Edu and Arteta have done, because for the most part they've been bang on.
Yeah, and I don't think I've necessarily seen any real criticism of this link. I know that Ramsdale has faced a little bit of criticism in the last kind of I think ever since the Southampton game where he made that mistake with the pass out, that kind of really hit, I think, people's view of him as a goalkeeper. And he then really started receiving a fair amount of criticism. I think more than fair amount of criticism, to be honest. And when Raya gets brought up, it makes sense in my head, because in 2020, Arsenal had a number of offers turned down for Raya. He was Arteta's number one choice, Drew, as the goalkeeper that he wanted. I don't think it's any surprise then, whilst the link in itself, I think, was a shock to everybody. When you take a step back and you breathe for a second, I think it does make a lot of sense, especially when already, despite having Thomas Partey in a system that is only playing one defensive midfielder right now, we brought in Declan Rice for £105 million. despite having Smith Rowe and Vieira that we signed last year that can play attacking 10s on that left-hand side, we still brought in Kai Havertz. And despite the fact we've got Ben White and Zinchenko, we've brought in Yuri and Timber who can play on either flank and even in the middle if we wanted to. So it kind of still, with signing Raya, falls into that strategy of if you have an established starter, it doesn't deter us from going out and buying someone that could also compete with them.
Yeah, I don't think it necessarily deters that, but I think it's the one position where it's almost irrelevant. And you put this in the Yama Twitter chat before, really quickly before I signed in, is that if you look at Bayern Munich, Manuel Neuer has been first choice there for 12 seasons. He's never had a competitive backup. He's had Sven Ulrich, who's quite solid as a backup, but unless Neuer was injured, he's started over 50 matches most seasons he's been there, barring injury. He's played between 30 and 32 of the 34 Bundesliga matches every season. He plays every Champions League match. He gets the bulk of the DFB Pokal matches as well. So I don't think you need 2 first choice keepers. I don't. And the last club I can really think of maybe was when Marc-Andre ter Stegen first went to Barca. He was competing for the number 1 shirt with another established number 1, and then eventually one of them won out, and then the other one left. I forget who the other one was at that time. It wasn't Silesen. It was somebody else. I can't remember who. But that was the last time I can really think of a club who really had 2 actually established keepers fighting for a number 1 shirt. You just don't normally see it.
Barcelona, well, they had Silesen and ter Stegen at the club.
And then who else was it? Wasn't there somebody else in there as well? Maybe. I honestly can't remember. Neto.
Do you remember
Maybe was
Neto?
it Neto?
Yeah, it might have been Neto, actually. Yeah, it's a big shout. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just don't feel like, and I'm kind of with Ben, if you ask me what makes more sense for 40 million right now, I'd rather have Mohamed Kudus. Like, because then you're figuring a player who can come in, who gives you a really good backup for Saka, can play 9, can play central midfield. That makes more sense for that sort of depth where you need those rotational options further forward. But as for keepers, if your first choice keeper is fit, you don't really rest a keeper for fitness either, really, unless they're dealing with actual fitness problems. So to me, this tells me 2 things. If it's credible and we actually go and complete that deal, it means that, to me, I think, even though we just extended Ramsdale, I would say that Ramsdale's long-term future at Arsenal is definitely not guaranteed at that point. Because as we also before, we wanted Raya before we got Ramsdale. And I think we can probably agree Raya is probably on just about Ramsdale's caliber. If you look at the data around Raya, he's very, very good in a Brentford system.
They're in the same bracket, to be honest.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And when you're linked with Bayern as a keeper, as a long-term replacement for Manuel Neuer, Raya probably fits that bill given the profile of keeper he is. Obviously, this answer would be really simple. If Matt Turner was the only keeper we had right now, and we're going after David Raya, I'd be thrilled. But to me, it's just like, do we need Raya and Ramsdale right now? I don't think so. So
interesting.
The finances behind it just kind of are a bit wonky to me, so to speak. But in terms of player profile, it's great, 100%. But it just doesn't make sense for me in terms of how we're trying to build things out. And inevitably, if we do get him, you have to think whoever loses out in that one number 1 battle will want to eventually probably leave pretty quickly, probably within the season.
I would agree. Yeah.
So
Ben, I'm going to ask you a really scary question. Do you agree with Drew?
On this point, I'm going to specify on this point, yes, because I was trying to think of other people that have had effectively 2 number 1s fighting for.
Oh, Neto replaced Silesen, by the way. I've just checked that.
That's the one. Thank you. So it was Silesen and ter Stegen. Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking De Gea and Romero at United is the one that comes to mind because every time Romero has a good game, the next game De Gea's back in, and everyone's asking about Romero. At the end of the day, he left for free, I think.
Did he go to Argentina? Something like
that? Yeah, maybe.
I'll have a look.
But it feels like no matter what you choose, if you bring in goalkeepers for a combined 65 million, if you keep one of them, the other one's going to be going down in value, like just naturally, because he's not playing.
He went to Venezia, by the way, in Italy, is where he went. So that's a
Venezia,
very strange move.
What a downgrade.
Juniors. So he had a little holiday in Venice before heading off back to there. So there you go.
But yeah, it feels like the maybe just because of the optics of the deal, 40 million for a Premier League proven goalkeeper, but it feels like he'd come in and everyone would expect him to play, and Drew's right about the first and second choice keepers and not having two number ones, because whereas you were saying about how you can have Tomiyasu and White and still buy Timber, you could arguably play all three of those across your back four in a pinch. Whereas, unless David Raya's coming in to play inverted fullback or, left eight or whatever, you can only ever play one of them. Exactly. But you're only ever going to be able to play one of them for, we've got 55, 60 games next season if we go through everything. So you're asking Raya, who's a fully fledged Spanish international, to come and either sit on the bench, or Ramsdale, who's fighting for number one in the England setup, to come and sit on the bench. And it feels like, well, it will breed a lot of competition for Ramsdale. He might get rid of some of the complacency that we've seen, maybe against Southampton, for instance. It does feel like it's a bit overkill. And I'm not against overkill necessarily, but if it works, it'll be great. But I just don't know how it works, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay. No, that's fine. I do disagree with you both, actually, on this.
Okay.
I don't ever think that the way in which I understand Arsenal's budgeting is in a way in which, if we sign Raya, to my understanding, it wouldn't stop us signing someone like Mohamed Kudus if we wanted to sign Mohamed Kudus. Because in my understanding of the budgeting system at Arsenal is every player that Arsenal has a valuation. So there was a lot of kind of criticism before we signed Rice that we were going so big for Havertz that it would stop us from going to that extra mile to get Rice if we needed to go over that 100 million. And I said, no, that's not the way that it works. Arsenal have a valuation for Havertz that they're willing to meet in the same way that they have another target like Rice and have another certain valuation they'll be willing to go to. And I still think they go beyond it sometimes. They certainly did with Mudryk, despite not getting him. And I think they did again with Rice. But I think they got Havertz what they felt was a fair figure still for what the player they were getting, even though it was a risk. They had it with Yuri and Timber and actually got him for less than the valuation of well below the valuation that Ajax had for him. And then with Rice, obviously, they had to go slightly beyond just to get that deal done and finish and over the line. With Raya and Kudus as two options, both of those players they'll have valuations for in the same way. So if they feel as though Raya is worth 40 million, which is what I understand Brentford to want, and if they think that Kudus is worth a similar price tag, again, I think that's the feeling from Ajax, that it would cost around £40 million, then they would be open to doing that and spending that money to get those players in. Because if you think about it and you look at the positions in the squad where we're still in need of depth and quality and competition, striker and right wing is one area, and I think Kudus can obviously bring depth in those two areas. And I do think that goalkeeper is the other position where I go, well, behind the starter is quite a considerable gap for me between Ramsdale and Turner. I like Turner, and that's not a slight on him, but I don't think I'm pulling up any trees by saying that there is a significant difference in quality between the two goalkeepers. So when it comes to adding Raya into this group, and it seems as though Turner is going to go off permanently, and we'll talk about that as well shortly, I think that what you're doing is a side that is pushing for the Premier League and pushing for the Champions League and all of this stuff, is that you're identifying a position in the squad and thinking, where can we get these incremental improvements? Where can we push this further? How can I make it so Ramsdale, because by the way, this signing doesn't mean it's the end of Ramsdale, because just ask Chelsea who went out of the club first, Eduard Mendy or Kepa. And, the answer in the end was Mendy, because Kepa won back that place. So it doesn't mean it's the end for Ramsdale, by the way, if Raya does come in. But what Raya does is that he pushes Ramsdale, and he'll be fighting for that place. And I look at Ramsdale, who's only just signed a brand new contract, by the way, as being in a position where he goes, well, I fought off Bernd Leno once, came in, took his place. This is another challenge. There maybe have been some lapses in judgment and concentration over the last, couple of months or so. And this is going to bring competition. And it's my challenge now to impress more than what David Raya can, if indeed he does come into the group. So, Drew, I'll let you come back. So you pulled all manner of facial expressions during that monologue. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
No, I mean, it's not that I disagree with the point of competition breeds performance. I agree with that aspect. I just think goalkeeper is probably the one position where it's borderline irrelevant. Because say if you have, and I take your points, the difference between Turner and Raya is, a decent chunk. I don't disagree with that. But really, even with Champions League, you're looking at Ramsdale, starting, just to say for argument's sake, 34 out of 38 Premier League matches, every Champions League match, then you give Turner both cups. You give him the FA Cup, you give him the League Cup, and that's his competition. And theoretically, if you make a deep enough run, that's nearly 10 starts, plus the residual Premier League starts. You're looking at between 10 to 15 starts for your backup, which is kind of what you want, and that's totally fine.
I think if we brought in Raya, you're going to give him the Champions League games. Like, surely that's the dynamic that it would go.
Yeah, probably, because maybe Arteta wants maybe different sort of profile of keeper for European matches. I don't know, obviously, but there is scope to suggest that maybe if he's targeting certain competitions for certain things or with certain dynamics on the pitch, then he wants a different option to Ramsdale for that. It's very possible. And certainly, it's, despite his mistakes last season, kind of at the back end, it's still hard to say that Ramsdale is a poor keeper. And it's hard to it's hard to upgrade on him right now. So maybe if you're getting sort of a lateral move, it's not bad per se. And again, I think if you can keep both keepers happy, obviously we come out like bandits. But essentially, that's very difficult to do. And the only way to really do that is by winning something. So this almost kind of tells me, if we're prepared to spend 40 million on Raya, and then maybe say we still go after Kudus for another 40 million, and I agree with you, by the way. I don't think that it's one or the other. I think what Ben and I were saying was, if you had to pull our arm, if we only had 40 million left, would we rather go after Raya or Kudus? We would pick Kudus. If we can do both,
sure.
Yeah, if we
can
do
agree
both,
with that. Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely do both if we can afford both. I think we can all probably agree with that as well. But I think a move like this, if it comes off, only works if you win something. But I do think that speaks to the fact that Arteta was very clear that he wants to compete for the Premier League again and Champions League. He's not going to go in Champions League with the idea of, maybe if we get out of the group, then our job's done. I think he legitimately looks at the field and says, look at how well we competed with City last season. There's no reason why we cannot then compete in Champions League against sides that City pulled ahead of. So I do think maybe in that instance, maybe he thinks there's enough starts to go around, and maybe he thinks keeping both players happy as possible. If you are genuinely competing on all fronts, then maybe the scope suggests it'll work out in terms of just like a morale standpoint. So it's tricky, but it's just not the deal I thought I would wake up today and expect to see. But again, like Ben and I said before, with the way Arteta and Edu have been with this club recently in the last 2 years, when we look at players and we're spending 30, 40, 50 million pounds on, each one of those deals has worked out. Not a single one of them has failed. And you can include Trossard now as well.
Fabio Vieira is the only one that...
That's the question mark. He's not failed, but there's still...
Sure, he's a question mark.
This is like, he's got to show something this season for me.
He's got another year,
Yeah, but he's not been bad per se. He's just not... He's not there yet. But yeah, good. So... yeah, that's true. Yeah, no, you're right. So, it's tricky, but again, if it works out, then we're laughing. So we'll see.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair summary of that. I think that, I agree on the point of if it was a 40 million, we had to choose between Kudus and Raya. I think Kudus is the greater need of the two. But it's not, as far as I'm aware, it's not that situation. I think perhaps that they feel as though there's still plenty of potential in incomings as well regarding player sales on that side of things that they could still secure. We'll talk a little bit more about that toward the end of the show as well. But this obviously... Ben, you'd think probably spells the end for Matt Turner. Now, obviously you both listened to me when I was saying that I feel as though Ramsdale is a significant level above him. I had someone reply to a tweet I put out earlier saying that Turner's not been given enough of a chance yet. I mean, what do you make of what this means for Turner, and is this harsh on Turner as a player that could, still play in the Premier League, it seems, with Nottingham Forest, the team interested?
Yeah, I think I'd be interested to know where the agitation for a move's come from. If you ask me, I think it's probably more from his side because the US have a decent enough stable of keepers with Zach Steffen, obviously ex-City, and him fighting for number one. He's coming off a really good Gold Cup with the US.
Has Zach Steffen been involved, Drew? I feel like it was somebody else, wasn't it, involved in it as well?
Ethan Horvath as well has been involved.
That's
but
the one. Yeah.
The gap between, Horvath is decent, but for me, Turner's the clear number one. But the way Berhalter is, if he's got a bit of Southgate in him still, if he trusts Turner will probably still start, even if he's not playing regularly. But Turner's also good enough to start for maybe half the sides in the Premier League. I think Turner's actually quite solid. And for Forest, and look at Dean Henderson. I think Dean Henderson was quite decent for Forest before he got injured. Turner for me is probably on par or better than Henderson. Just about in the same ballpark. Yeah, I think Turner's actually quite good. I think people just don't know because they don't see him play. But when he plays with the US, he's been excellent. So I do think that
I didn't realize Drew was going to go off on one.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm so defer to Drew on all things stars and stripes.
Jesus. But no, I do think that it would make sense in terms of just building his profile running up to a World Cup where we're hosting it or we're co-hosts. He's going to want the number one shirt still for that tournament. So if it's from him, it makes sense. So, yeah.
Yeah, I saw a good tweet as well that says something like, his stock's at an all-time high as well, having just come off the 3 penalty saves. The Gold Cup. Was that you?
Yeah, it was Tom.
I saw it. I was out. I was like, oh, that's a good tweet. I'll remember that and talk about that. And turns out it was just you anyway. Well, good tweet. But yeah,
regret saying it now.
So yeah, it's good if he wants to move. Then it's a good time to sell, and it's a good time for him to get a move for regular first team football. And Nottingham Forest, they need a goalkeeper. They're haggling over Dean Henderson at the moment. I think there's some issues with when they want the obligation to buy to kick in, and it's quite a wide gap between United and Forest. So that deal looks like it's stalled a bit. And if they can get Turner for 10 million, I think that's pretty good all round for Arsenal. I mean, they make profit on Turner. Turner gets a move to a Premier League side where he's going to face a massive volume of shots. And, he's going to improve most likely. And he's going to be in the shop window for next summer for the US as well. So I think all round it's a sensible move. As I say, it's just about which replacement we get in. And Raya was not the replacement I was expecting. If someone had said this morning, Turner's leaving, I would have gone, okay, that's fine. We'll find someone who's maybe 21, 22 coming up and sign them for 20 million.
Or 35,
Or sort of like, I look at Liverpool and I'm like, they've got Kelleher, and he obviously wants to leave now, but he was 20 when he was playing for them regular or in the cups. City signed Ortega, who was 29 on a free last summer. He's been fine. Really I wasn't expecting a perfect in the prime, perfect Mikel Arteta sort of play out with a high price tag, which is essentially where the sort of what the hell is going on with Raya came from when I first saw it.
Drew, were you coming in? I felt like you were going to come in there.
No, I was chuckling about what Ben said.
I think that from Matt Turner, as I say, the tweet that I put out earlier in the day it's an important point that Matt Turner's had a strong World Cup, Nations League, Gold Cup, and it means a player that's got very little game time guaranteed for him next season is at the peak of what I think his Arsenal value will be. I don't think Matt Turner's value as it stands right now is going to get any higher than it is right now. So if you can sell for £15 million plus to another Premier League side, we bought him for just under 10 million quid or around 10 million quid, I think it was. If you can get that deal done and you've made a profit within a year, it looks really good. It's not like you're losing a key part of your squad. And if you're bringing in someone like David Raya as well to be a competitor, you're arguably getting yourself in a position where you can even improve the goalkeeping area, not just reinforce or cover, if there indeed is an option. And that is something that you look at clubs and go, that's what big clubs do. That's what teams that, are fighting for Premier League titles and trying to win the Champions League do. So certainly, the David Raya stuff, I think, is really, really interesting. It'd be interesting to see if it's successful. Of course, all we know right now and where we are at the state of play is that Arsenal are considering a move. The price tag is said to be around £40 million. Brentford are open to selling him, and he apparently prefers us over Bayern. I suppose that's a good place to end this, Drew, on the Raya thing. Him preferring us to Bayern. We've heard that about Timber. We've heard that about Havertz. Are we now bigger than Bayern?
I mean, yeah, I just also kind of feel like Bayern's in such a weird space as well. The thing is we said before, players just want to play in the Premier League. When you are unquestionably the top club competition in Europe, that's where players want to be. Also where the money is. And it's not that Bayern players aren't paid handsomely; they are. But I think players at the top of the game just want to be in Premier League. I think that's just kind of it. So, yeah,
he
Bayern
started at Bayern, right? Because Neuer's got this. No. Is he still recovering from the fracture? Or
once Neuer's fit, he'll start. There's no I mean,
but this is a guy who's 37 now.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
No.
Neuer and Muller are like royalty at Bayern. They
Yeah,
they de facto are assistant managers. Yeah, they basically they call the shots. Essentially, if they don't like a manager, yeah, there's no question. There's no question about it. So I think once he's fit, he'll play. So I do think that, and Raya probably understands. I do also think Neuer is better than Ramsdale still, just. So I do think maybe Raya could also look at the move.
That's a fair compliment to Ramsdale.
I mean, it is. Yeah. But I do think Raya maybe looks at the move to us and says, well, if I have any chance of winning a starting job, it makes more sense to go to Arsenal than to go to Bayern. So
it's not because I've seen some people go, and I'm one of them. I was led to believe it as well. And with that point is that I felt as though if he went to Bayern, he'd probably be starting games. He might start at the beginning when Neuer's back fit. He comes in as you seem to be staying. David De Gea is now being linked as their alternative to Raya as well, which is
oh my god,
an amusing term. But I always felt that if he chose Arsenal instead of Bayern, I felt that was like a greater challenge for him as a player to come in and say, no, I back myself to try and beat Ramsdale to the slot, rather than getting an easier start at Bayern, but then the challenge comes later.
I mean, you can look at it both ways, I think. But I also do think, to answer your original question, I do think we are bigger than Bayern. And I don't think we weren't before. I think any of the top 4 clubs in Premier League are realistically, not in sporting success, no. Bayern a massive football landscape. But in terms of popularity, exactly. In terms of overall attractiveness moving forward, Arsenal was always going to be a bigger draw than Bayern Munich, just because Bayern doesn't have the. Go on.
I've just got visions of you saying that after we started Yaya Sanogo at the Allianz Arena. Back in 2015-16 when we were losing 10-2 and you're coming out saying, yeah, we're a bigger club than Bayern, it's fine.
No, but it's not on like historical merit. I mean, if we're talking about club, like how big historically a club are, Bayern Munich are bigger than Arsenal. But we're talking about as we sit in 2023, if you're a player choosing which club you would like to sign for, Arsenal being both a Premier League side, the club that they are anywhere with their own historical value, they're based in London, now back in the Champions League, in a project under Arteta that is only going in one direction, so that I think it makes Arsenal the more attractive.
Currently, the more attractive destination. Yes, the more attractive side. Yes, Bayern are historically much bigger than Arsenal in terms of current attractiveness.
We just need the live chat. I'm just predicting the live chat, Drew. Just ripping you to pieces. Talking about this guy said that Arsenal are bigger than Bayern.
I mean, I'm quite literally the biggest proponent of German football, and I'm telling you, currently Arsenal are more attractive than Bayern. There's no question in my mind.
Bayern have also had a lot of problem integrating signings into their squads. If you look at, I think that was one of the reasons Timber didn't go. He was mooted to go to Bayern, and he would rather go somewhere else because all the players that have gone to Bayern from Ajax, like Mazraoui was there, Gravenberch is there. They both want out because they haven't had enough game time. You see what happened to Sadio Mane, Marcel Sabitzer when he went there. Conrad Lime has now gone there, and I'd be surprised if it's too different. They've got a core group.
I'm so gutted about that.
Yeah, no,
it's bad very much.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I am very gutted that he's not playing. He's playing in the different red shirt, but I guess I'm more bothered about that.
The issue with Bayern, and we can move on after. But the issue with Bayern is that it's still, whether they admit it or not, it's a different story. They're still very much controlled by player opinion, 100%. So that's not a dynamic a lot of players want to be involved in. Personally, if I was questionable, I would not want to. I don't have to glad hand you to get on with my club career. That seems a bit too corporate America for me, really. So
Yeah, it is interesting, that dynamic between Bayern and Arsenal and how clubs now, the whole irony of, I remember Ivan Gazidis saying, we're moving to the Emirates to compete with Bayern, and now 2023, we're finally starting to, compete in terms of transfers at least. It's now on the pitch, or we need to show that we can compete with them in the Champions League on European terms. So let's hopefully see that moving forwards. That's all your goalkeeper stuff covered. I hope that we've covered everything that we can. Leave your comments down below if you've got any thoughts on anything we've discussed in today's show. I would recommend listening to the whole conversation rather than just a snippet that you're going to see someone clip and put online that's going to go viral of Drew saying that Bayern are not big as big as Arsenal. But
it's inevitable. But here we are.
Listen to the whole conversation and leave a comment down below on your thoughts. Other transfer news: Sambi Lokonga, Ben. There's been significant kind of reports now. Our good mutual friend Sasha Tavaleri has reported that Lokonga seems close to a loan move. There's been suggestions that loan move may include an option to buy, which could turn even into an obligatory clause to buy if he makes a certain amount of kind of contributions, be that through appearances or whatever. Do you feel as though that this is the right move for Arsenal to do? And I'm going to kind of caveat this with ignore the obligatory clause for the moment, because it seems a little bit of hearsay in there and there. If it's just a loan with maybe an option, is that the right step at this point in time for both the player and the club?
I think a period away from the Emirates where he's going to play every week under a manager that he had the trust of at Anderlecht is a great move for him. I think the option to buy depends significantly on how much the option is. If he has an excellent season, he suddenly could be a £40 million player. He's still only 22, 23, I forget. But, I think he's at a point in his career where he needs games. He's not going to get them at Arsenal. The position that I thought he was going to play, which was more of, I think last season in the USA tour, pre-season tour, he played a game or maybe half a game in that sort of left 8 role. And I thought he'd go there playing further forward, like moving forward. But obviously now Xhaka's gone.
The Chelsea game, I think it was.
Yeah,
Chelsea game.
I think it was one of... He scored in it.
I think he scored against Chelsea, didn't he? We beat him like 5-0, and I think he scored. Yeah.
But I thought that was where he was going to play going forward. Then obviously he fell out of favour last season, fell on the packing order, and we've changed a bit I say a bit, we've gone from Xhaka to Havertz. So it feels like that role or his skill set isn't necessarily best suited for that role anymore. And when we've got 3 players who can play at 6, and now the rumours of Partey going have died down, he needs minutes, he needs game time, and he needs to be in a place where he feels appreciated and can show that he's a very good footballer, because there is a very good footballer in there. It's just not working out at Arsenal. And if they can find a way to send him on loan, get his confidence back up, and then sell him either break even or sell him at a little loss or a little profit, either way, then I think that's a good move for the player and for the club.
Is it the right thing for the player and for Arsenal?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen Sasha talk quite a lot about it as well. But for me, it's simple. Company knows him. Company will use him in a way where at Anderlecht, his role was more simplified. He was sitting deeper, linked midfield to defense, played short passes, helped keep control. That suits how Burnley want to play at the moment. So, yeah, it just makes sense to me overall, really, if you think about it. So, yeah.
I agree. I think that getting a loan move for Lokonga is probably the right choice. Some people have said that, he's going to lose value. And I was like, no, he will still have 2 years left on his contract when he finishes. Yeah. If he has a good season, it would arguably hopefully enable Arsenal maybe to break even, on what they paid in 2021, which isn't the best place to be in if you're a club hoping to break even. But not all transfers are going to work out, especially when you take risks on projects like Lokonga, and Tavares, again, is another one. So, hopefully he has a good season if he does leave for the club. I think a full season with a team, is what's going to be the most beneficial. We'll give him back a bit more stability as well. Did either of you manage to catch a translation of a Nicolas Pepe interview that he did? I don't know if you saw it, Drew. I saw John put this in our chat today.
He did. I did not actually get to see it or read it, so I'm not 100% on what just happened. So please enlighten me.
I read one from a couple of weeks ago, but nothing recent.
Yeah, there was one a couple of weeks ago, but there was one also. I think it's done in French, but he basically talks a lot about how Arsenal is such a huge challenge for him, and kind of, it's really hurt his kind of time, and he's determined to kind of make it back. Where do you, Ben, kind of see Pepe between now and the end of the summer? Do you see any kind of attraction from another team coming forward, or do you think it will be one of those investments, as Edu calls them?
I think it's one of those that we'll probably see movement on late in the window one way or another. It feels like everybody and their dog knows that Pepe is on the market for the right price. He's got decently high wages. I think he's on like 140 maybe. But
21, something like that. Yeah,
everybody knows that you could probably pay 5p in his taxi fare and you get him out of the Emirates if you wanted him. So it feels like it's a move that people can sort of have as a fallback. Like you can go for your first target and then say, well, worst comes to worst, we can pivot to Pepe. And it might be that Saudi Arabia works with their list of 2 million targets that they've got and decide that they want him to play somewhere. So those are the options, I think, for him before we terminate his contract. But I do think that he's sort of on the he's on the rubbish pile at Arsenal, isn't he? Wasn't taken to the USA, training on his own. It feels like it is just a matter of time before something gives, and Arsenal will be desperately hoping that that's a tiny transfer fee or a loan deal with maybe some of his wages covered, rather than having to agree a mutual termination. But yeah, it's one. He doesn't have a future at Arsenal. I mean, I think that's pretty clear from us extending Reece Nelson and still looking for a right winger. So yeah, whatever his comments have said, really, it's not. He's not going to get back into this side, and it's just a case of where he goes and when he goes.
Yeah, it does seem that this interview was done around a month ago, from what I'm looking at. So maybe it was those comments that you saw recently, but it's just been what I find ironic about this, Drew, and I think this kind of segues nicely into the other big deal we've seen go through in the last few days is. The amount of money Arsenal paid was £72 million. And we've just seen Manchester United pay £72 million for another forward that has a kind of, I feel as though it's an equal question mark over them, because Pepe had one really good season for Lille in Liga, didn't necessarily fit what even Emery was kind of looking at in terms of what he wanted, and then didn't suit at all what Arteta wanted. Rasmus Højlund, £72 million, 9 goals in Serie A. I know he scored, I think it was 18 or around that across all competitions. But it seems as though now, and I tweeted this as well, and I know that I think you're thinking along the same lines, is that it feels like clubs in Europe just have to basically play a 20-year-old or 21-year-old striker or forwards for one season, hope they score around 10 goals, and then sell them for 60 million quid. Like that's just, it just seems like it's almost a guarantee for clubs to make money in this way. But what do you think?
Well, I mean, about Pepe, I just kind of feel like, just quickly with that, I think if we can't sell him, I would rather buy his out the rest of his contract and just let him go. Because even if he somehow came back and tried to work his way into Arsenal, he's never the kind of winger that will suit. He doesn't press well. He doesn't transition really well. Doesn't track back. Every part of his game is not suited. It's more ironically more suited to say maybe if Emery rehabilitated him, at Villa, but they just got Moussa Diaby, so that's out the window. In terms of Højlund, I just kind of feel like also he only scored, I think it was 10 or 11 goals last season across all competitions in 35-ish matches, and the difference
half of those were substitute appearances. In fairness.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing, I think Adamo Lukman had more goals in Serie A on less minutes than Rasmus Højlund. So it's kind of like...
But Lukman doesn't sound like Haaland.
Lamb, Ben. I'm back from that.
No, I do think that... I think Højlund has the potential. I think that potential is pretty clear. But I think the difference between our gamble on Pepe and United's gamble on Højlund is Pepe was arguably one of the best players in Ligue 1 the season before we bought him. Højlund, everyone knows his potential is there, but he was one of the more inconsistent attackers for Atalanta that season. So I think United, I think there's two factors behind this. One, I think United are banking on him hitting his potential, even if he doesn't necessarily suit Ten Hag per se. The other aspect is I genuinely, and I believe this, and you can call me a conspiracy theorist if you want, that's fine. I genuinely think part of this is United's trying to manufacture another talking point of them having their own Scandinavian center forward to compete with City's Scandinavian forward.
Is it bad of me to ask the question that Rasmus Højlund sounds like Erling Haaland and Man United are just trying to have their own version of a Scandinavian striker?
and it's quite literally Denmark versus Norway in Manchester, trying to buy into that whole another way of maybe garnering interest from some sort of revenue stream elsewhere. It has to be, because if you look at it, the other types of players, we had this chat as well. They could use that other money for another established center forward with better pedigree, with still high. They could have gotten Colomwani, who for me is a better player than Rasmus Højlund. Who probably
If you're going to spend around 85 million euros, if you're going to spend 85 million euros on a forward, buy Colomwani. Why why
Yeah.
you invest in we may look silly, in 6 months' time. You
It's
don't know.
very
It's
possible.
football. But I mean, for me, it was that international break in, I think it was March, where he scored a hat trick against Finland,
Mm-hmm.
and then he scored 2 against Kazakhstan. And I felt that in that moment, you saw all of the compilations go, this is the next Erling Haaland, this is the next one. And so Man United have gone, I'm going to take that one, just and bank on him being, that guy. Ben, what are your thoughts on Rasmus? Well, by that interview, I did manage to get the exact quotes from Pepe, which I'll read out for you in a bit.
Yeah, I'm torn on. I think that he could well be a £75 million player in 3 seasons. I think that he is unlikely to be a £70 million player in 3 seasons at Manchester United based on their recent history. I mean, Ten Hag could turn this around, could be proved wrong. But Manchester United, as a football club, don't tend to have the most patience with players. And he's not going to come in and score 15 goals. He might score 15, but he's not going to come in and, challenge the top of the goal scoring charts. Most likely, he's going to come in and he'll miss chances and he won't be perfect. He's still a really raw player. Drew and I had this conversation before. He's a bit like Folarin Balogun in terms of for the system he's trying to play in. He's still really, really raw. So it's going to take a lot of coaching, a lot of work, and he's got all the attributes to be really, really good. And you can see why Atalanta would demand so much money, and you can sort of see why Manchester United would be willing to take the gamble on him. But when you've got Casemiro, Varane, the players in your side that are getting older, taking a gamble on a 19-year-old for 75 million when you're trying to challenge for titles and challenge on the Champions League front, and it doesn't quite add up to me. As you say, I mean, Colomani is available. I'm sure that there are plenty of players available that scouts would be able to find that you and I and Drew, looking through FBref, haven't found that would cost less than Højlund. And I think Højlund was £45 million before Manchester United got involved. And then it went up to 100.
Yeah,
and,
that's what it was being quoted at. Yeah,
it's
also just, I feel like if Man United weren't involved and PSG bid that 50 million euros, I had that sense that if it was just PSG, they probably would have got that deal done at 50 million euros.
Well, how much did Atalanta buy him for? Wasn't it only like 12 million that Atalanta bought him for? It was like they're making a massive profit on
the for like nothing.
That's what I mean. Sorry, yeah. I'm trying to find it. How much did they buy him for? 17 million euros.
Yeah.
That's
they've sold him in 1 season for
five times profit.
That amount.
That's absolutely ridiculous. Well, credit to Atalanta for banking on people spending stupid money.
Gasperini is known for supercharging his attackers at Atalanta.
That's true.
They always outperform what you'd expect them to perform. I mean, Duvan Zapata, I think it was, and Luis Muriel were scoring goals for fun a couple of seasons back. So it's a very risky deal, and it's not the sort of deal that I think you would do if you were at the top and could stay there. It's not like a Julian Alvarez who's 14 million and you can, bring him in and back up. Or if Alvarez is playing for United at 14 million, that would be absolutely fine. But he's coming in with this massive price tag, still a really raw player. And I'm sort of a bit worried for him, a bit like how we saw Pepe, they had such high expectations. I think Pepe got 10 goals, 9 assists in his first season or something.
Yeah.
It wasn't bad, but because the expectations were so high, because the price tag was so high, and football, the market has generally spiraled up, so it's not the end of the world, but it's still a lot of money to put on the shoulders of a 19-year-old kid.
So I think a lot of the comparison as well is I do think, so get ready for the hindsight to come in later on that season. I do think Mudryk is going to do quite well under Pochettino. If Pochettino does not get hired at Chelsea, does Mudryk actually develop under Graham Potter? I don't think so. And then the same thing. That was a huge gamble at the wrong time for Chelsea. I think they lucked out by getting Pochettino, a manager who knows how to develop young talent, who knows how to use wingers in that way that will actually suit Mudryk. But with Højlund, it's just like, put it this way, extras aside, Højlund cost more than Erling Haaland did. And Erling Haaland had a established goal-scoring record. Yeah, but still, an established goal-scoring record across not just in Bundesliga with Dortmund, but in Champions League with both Dortmund and Salzburg. already as an 18-year-old when he first came in. So it's just kind of like, I mean, it's not my money, it's United. So if it flops, I'm going to love it. But it just seems like at some point you have to question, when deals like this still keep happening, how it's going to adversely affect the market moving forward. I think it already has, which is why this deal went off in the first place. Because as you say, when clubs know a Premier League team is interested, that knows how to spend, they're going to milk it. And then all of a sudden that will reset the market again. And then someone else of his, like, say if Benjamin Sesko has a really good season with RB Leipzig, how much is he going to cost? Is it going to be kind of a similar thing? Do you know what I mean? So it's just like, at some point, something has to give. But I guess we'll have to see. I don't know.
Yeah, we will. We will have to see, very much so. I'm looking forward to seeing it. Just to give you those quotes from Pepe, he says, people say that he identified me, being Arteta, as a player that wasn't up to the level in this team, in his philosophy. It's completely false. When he arrived, he had City's philosophy. He had a squad that was filled with quality and backups in every position. When he spoke to me, he said he counted on me. He wanted me to do this or that, and you have to focus on that. He improved me in every way. He spoke to me the whole time. I watched videos with his assistants all the time. He really believed in me. He said that I had incredible potential, so we need to extract that potential. At the end of the first season, he spoke with me and told me to do this or that, and the second season comes along and I was a substitute. I was going mad. How could I be a substitute when he said he counted on me? Everything is spinning in your head. I was a substitute. It was at the time when they signed Willian. He is a number 10 or a winger, but he plays on the wing for like 11 or 12 matches in a row. I feel like I'm reading something that a YouTuber said, like at the time that Willian was starting games. It feels like he's just saying what a lot of people were thinking. He continues there, my head turns knowing that I had spoken with the coach and it wasn't like that, but that improved in the sense that he gave me a chance. I scored against Sheffield United at the Emirates. The confidence started to come back. I started to speak better, but it was a bit cold. I started to speak to agents, but we didn't see each other like before, but it improved. It's true that he labelled me. It's not true that he labelled me. Not true at all. He helped me in every way on a tactical level in terms of game intelligence. His philosophy requires a lot of intelligence. He knew my style of play wasn't waiting in possession. It was cutting inside. It wasn't out on the right. Before I was a bit freer. I had to wait in my zone, and I wasn't like that before. And these parts of my game that he tried to improve, he always wanted to help me with all of that. So he was overall positive. You know, I don't know why there was kind of this rhetoric being talked about that he was going in on Arsenal. I think obviously the questioning of like the Willian situation is something that pretty much everyone did because Willian was so poor for so long and still played. I think Arteta has shown that loyalty to players. I think Arteta learned a lot from that Willian situation as well. We dealt with things later on, like the Willian. I think remember when he went to the Middle East and was it Salt Bay that he went to, came back and didn't really get disciplined for it. And then obviously Arteta dealt with the Aubameyang disciplinary thing a lot more strictly. And people kind of compared those two things as saying, well, you're treating Willian this way and you're treating another player this way. I actually think that Arteta was learning from that Willian mistake, if you like, and being too lenient with that situation. And since then, you know, we've just not had any kind of disciplinary issues. There's obviously question marks about Balogun at the moment, which I wanted to get onto, but we've run out of time. But we haven't had anything confirmed regarding the reasons behind his absence, other than Arteta saying he has a minor foot injury, which, I mean, if you could put any larger quotation marks around that of suspicion, I don't know how you could make them any bigger, but, you know, we'll have to take his word for it for now. But as I said, we have reached the end of today's show. We've done a lot, of course, on the goalkeeper situation. I hope you've enjoyed that. And we've talked about potential outgoings as well, which I hope you've enjoyed also. But Drew, thank you so much for your time, mate. Tell people they can find you and what you're going to be up to.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at xgrump90, and you can find what I write, what I write about at 101 Great Goals.
It's just a great handle.
It is. I'm so happy I actually did that. Yeah, you can find my work at 101 Great Goals along with my good friend Ben here. And then again, like I said before, I started a free kind of I forget the website because I don't really use it right now. But I started kind of like, thank you, yeah, free Substack just about talking about things away from football, like travel, like mental health, that kind of thing. So if you're interested, check that out. The link is also in my Twitter. So yeah.
There you go. Massive thank you to Drew. Fantastic stuff as always. xgrump90 is where you can find him on Twitter. Ben, absolute pleasure to speak with you once again, my friend, and catch up with you and have you back on the show. Tell people they can find you and what you're going to be up to.
Yeah, I mean, my handle's on screen at Ben Browning 3. I'll be with
He's
Drew.
savvier than you, Drew. He's put it on the screen.
Everyone knows me by now, so I don't have to.
Oh, everyone knows me.
I'll be a less grumpy version of Drew. So, there's always that to look forward to. And I'll be on 101 Great Goals and the Bruised Banana FC podcast as well, which you can find in my bio, I think. I might not have updated it yet, but if you can't, at Bruised Banana FC, Drew's also on that when he can be bothered. And that's basically us, I think.
When he wants to turn his
comes
camera
a package
on,
now.
Yeah, you do. You're a duo. I love it. It's fantastic. It's like the Silver twins. So you had Fabio and what was the other one? We were talking about this morning. Raphael, yes.
Raphael.
You'd cause Arsenal nightmares playing right and left mids in the Champions League is what you would do. But thank you, everybody, for tuning in and listening. We very much appreciate your time. As always, it's very much appreciated. Do drop a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel. If you would still like to support the actual fundraiser for the 72-hole golf challenge is still open if you're based in the UK. If you go to the link down in the description. For those that are based outside of the UK that wanted to donate, we have made the decision that sadly we're not going to be able to accept those donations. Only reason for that is because it turned out that the whole process of getting donations from abroad was so complicated that it was just not feasible, sadly. So apologies for that. If you know someone in the UK that can obviously donate on your behalf to the website, maybe that's the way to go about it. And then they can transfer you or whatever. But yeah, sadly, it didn't work out. Cancer Macmillan's website is fantastic in 99% of ways, other than for people outside of the UK that want to donate, which sucks, but it's the reality of that. But thank you to everyone that has donated. And I hope to update you on how the day's gone about with a video of some kind. And hopefully we've made it to the end after what we're estimating to be 14 hours of golf, which is quite the challenge. But thank you, everyone that's listened. Really appreciate your time. As always, have a fantastic day. And we'll speak to you soon. Have a fantastic one. And as always, up the Arsenal.